If it has happened to you, you already know it does not feel like an emotion. Emotions are things you have. This is something that has you. You cannot eat properly. You cannot sleep properly. You check your phone with a frequency you would be embarrassed to admit to. You replay a 9-second conversation from Tuesday, looking for hidden meaning in the word yeah. Your friends have stopped asking because they know what you are going to say, and you know you are going to say it anyway. And underneath all of it, there is a physical sensation, somewhere behind the sternum, that you would struggle to describe to a doctor. We have a word for this, and the word is soft. We call it falling in love, as though it were a gentle descent. It is not gentle. Anyone in the middle of it will tell you it is closer to being taken over. Here is the question this video is about. That experience, the specific one, the one that ruins your appetite and hijacks your attention. How old is it? Did it arrive with poetry? With cities? With the idea of marriage? Or was somebody feeling exactly this, with no words for it, and nobody to explain it to, 100,000 years ago? The answer turns out to be older than almost anyone expects, and we can date parts of it with surprising precision. Let's start with what is actually happening inside your head, because it is not what people assume. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, a research team led by the anthropologist Helen Fisher did something that had not been done before. They found people who were intensely, recently, painfully in love, put them in a brain scanner, and showed them a photograph of the person. The prediction, before they ran it, was that they would see activity in the emotional centers of the brain, the regions associated with feeling. That is not what lit up. What lit up was the ventral tegmental area and the caudate nucleus. These are not emotion centers. They sit deep in the brain. They run on dopamine, and they are part of the reward system. They are the machinery that motivates you toward things you need. Food, water, anything your body has decided it must have. Romantic love, in a brain scan, does not look like happiness. It looks like wanting. That single finding explains a great deal about why this experience feels the way it does. Happiness is settled. Wanting is not. Wanting is restless and focused and impossible to put down, and it does not stop when you are satisfied, because the whole function of the system is to keep you moving toward the target until you have it. You are not experiencing a feeling. You are experiencing a drive, and it is running on the same circuitry that gets an animal across a landscape to water. Now, that alone would be interesting. The next finding is stranger. An Italian research team led by Donatella Mariziti wanted to know what was happening with serotonin in people who had recently fallen in love. They measured a specific marker in the blood, the serotonin transporter, in 3 groups: people newly and intensely in love, people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, and a healthy control group. The controls came out where you would expect. The people in love and the people with OCD came out in the same place. Their levels were significantly lower than the controls. In the early stage of romantic love, one specific measurable feature of your neurochemistry resembles a clinical anxiety disorder characterized by intrusive, uncontrollable, repetitive thoughts, which is exactly what it feels like. The thoughts arrive whether or not you want them. You cannot decide to stop. You replay the same 9 seconds. That is not weakness of character. That is a serotonin level. And here is the part that reframes it entirely. Fisher has argued this state is not a malfunction at all. It is a mechanism, and it has a job. Choosing a mate is expensive. In evolutionary terms, it is one of the most consequential decisions any animal makes. And for a human, it can mean years of shared effort, shared risk, and shared children. Whatever process makes that decision needs to be strong enough to override everything else, focused enough to fix on one individual, and persistent enough to survive obstacles, distance, and the disapproval of everyone around you. An obsession does all of that. The system is not broken when it takes over your life. Taking over your life is the specification. So we have a mechanism, and it is physical, and it runs on ancient equipment, which raises the obvious question. Is it ours, or is it just the culture we happen to live in? For most of the 20th century, the academic answer leaned heavily toward culture. Romantic love was widely treated as a European invention, something that emerged with medieval troubadours and courtly poetry and then spread. Under that view, what you feel is a script you were handed, and people in other times and places simply did not have it. In 1992, 2 anthropologists, William Jankowiak and Edward Fisher, decided to check. They went through the ethnographic record for 166 distinct societies, looking for specific evidence. Accounts of personal anguish and longing, love songs, elopements that defied family arrangements, folklore about lovers, informants describing the experience directly. They found clear evidence of romantic love. That is around 89%. And in most of the remainder, The researchers concluded the evidence was absent rather than the phenomenon, because the ethnographers had simply never asked. Every kind of society. Societies where romantic attachment was actively discouraged as a threat to family alliances. It is there anyway. People elope. People compose songs. People suffer. Romantic love is not a European invention. It is not an invention at all. It is standard equipment, and any culture that tries to suppress it spends a lot of effort failing, which pushes the question further back. If it is universal across our species, it was probably there before we scattered across the planet. So how much further back does it go? Here the evidence changes character. We stop asking anthropologists and start looking at bodies. Start with something you can check on your own face. Run your tongue along your upper canines, the pointed teeth either side of your front four. They are small, barely pointed. In most people, they sit almost flush with the teeth beside them. Now compare that to a male chimpanzee, whose canines are long, blade-like, and constantly resharpened against the lower teeth. In primates generally, big male canines mean one thing, and it is not diet. They are weapons for fighting other males. Where males compete violently over access to females, canines are large. Where they do not, canines shrink. Ours have been shrinking for a very long time. In Ardipithecus, from around 4.4 million years ago, male canines are already substantially reduced compared to what you would expect. The anthropologist Owen Lovejoy has argued this is a signal. Reduced male-to-male combat implies a change in how mating was organized, away from a system where the strongest male monopolizes multiple females, and towards something involving more stable, longer-term bonds between individuals. That argument is genuinely contested, and I want to be straight about that. Other researchers point out that canine reduction can have other causes, and that the fossil record is thin. It is a strong hypothesis, not a settled fact. But there is a second line of evidence, and it comes from a comparison nobody expects. Across primates, the relative size of the testes tracks very closely with mating system. It is one of the most reliable relationships in the field, where females mate with many males. Sperm from different males compete inside the female reproductive tract, and males evolve large testes to produce more of it. Where a single male controls a group and there is no competition, testes are small. Chimpanzees, who are highly promiscuous, have enormous testes for their body size. Gorillas, where one silverback controls a harem and rivals never get close, have remarkably small ones. Humans sit in between, not chimpanzee, not gorilla. In the middle, what that suggests is a species with some pair bonding, but not perfect fidelity, some competition, but not constant, which, if you look honestly at human behavior across every society that has ever been recorded, is precisely what you would predict. Our anatomy describes us fairly accurately, and it is not flattering, and it is also not new. Now, anatomy tells you about mating systems. It does not tell you about feelings. A pair bond can, in principle, be a purely mechanical arrangement with nothing going on inside. So how do we know there was something going on inside? For that, we go to a small brown rodent. The prairie vole lives in the grasslands of North America, and it is, by rodent standards, extraordinary. Prairie voles form long-term pair bonds. A male and female will mate, then stay together, share a nest, raise young together, and show clear preference for each other over strangers. Introduce the partner and a stranger, and the vole reliably chooses the partner. The montane vole, a close relative living in nearby habitat, does none of this. It mates and moves on. Two closely related species, completely different social lives. Researchers wanted to know what the difference was. It came down to receptors, specifically, where in the brain the receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin are distributed. In prairie voles, those receptors are concentrated in the reward regions of the brain, the same dopamine-driven areas that showed up in Fisher's human scans. In montane voles, they are not, which means that in the prairie vole, being near a specific partner triggers the reward system. The partner becomes rewarding in the way food is rewarding. Then researchers took the experiment further. In a study published in Nature in 2004, a team used a viral vector to increase vasopressin receptor expression in the reward region of male meadow voles, another non-monogamous species. Those males started showing partner preference, not because they had been trained or exposed to a new environment, or given any experience they had not had before. A change in receptor distribution in one brain region shifted their social behavior toward pair bonding. The mechanism for attachment is chemical, it is specific, and it is present in a rodent, which tells you something important about the timescale. This is not a human innovation. The hardware that makes one individual matter more than all the others is old. It is widely distributed across mammals, and our version is a variant of it rather than an invention. Whatever we did not build it from nothing. We inherited it. So the drive is ancient. The chemistry is ancient. The universality is established, but there is still a gap, and it is the one that matters most. None of that proves anyone ever felt about another person the way you have felt about someone. Mechanism is not experience. A vole choosing a partner is not a person lying awake at 3 in the morning. For that, we need people leaving evidence of what somebody meant to them. And this is where archaeology finally has something to say, though it says it sideways. Go to Sungur, in Russia, about 200 kilometers east of Moscow. The site dates to roughly 34,000 years ago, and it contains one of the most extraordinary burials ever excavated. 2 children, laid head to head. That alone would be notable. What makes it staggering is what is with them. The bodies are covered in beads carved from mammoth ivory. Not a handful, around 10,000 of them, across the 2 burials, along with carved animal figures, spears made from straightened mammoth tusk, and pierced Arctic fox teeth. Archaeologists have attempted to replicate the beads using period-appropriate tools. The estimates for how long a single bead takes vary, but they are measured in tens of minutes to an hour each. Do the arithmetic on 10,000. Somebody, or more likely a group of somebodies, spent an enormous quantity of a very short life, sitting and carving ivory, in an ice age, for 2 dead children. Nobody had to do this. It produced nothing. It fed no one. Every hour spent on it was an hour not spent hunting, or making tools, or sleeping. That is not proof of romantic love. Those are children, and the feeling involved is a different one. But it is proof of something else that matters enormously for this question. It is proof that 34,000 years ago, human beings experienced attachment to specific individuals, strong enough to make them behave in a way that is completely irrational by every survival metric. The capacity is there. The intensity is there. It shows up in the archaeological record because it was strong enough to make people waste thousands of hours. Then there are the burials that are harder to look at without projecting. In 2007, at a Neolithic site near Mantua in northern Italy, archaeologists uncovered 2 skeletons that had been buried facing each other, arms and legs entwined, foreheads close. They are roughly 6,000 years old. The press named them the lovers of Valdero almost immediately, and the name stuck. Now, I have to be careful here, and so should you. We do not know their relationship. We do not know if the position was arranged by them, or for them, or what it meant to the people who did it. Reading a modern romance into a Neolithic grave is exactly the kind of thing archaeologists are trained to resist. But we do know somebody arranged them that way. Bodies do not fall into that position. Somebody, at a funeral 6,000 years ago, took the time to place 2 people so that they would be facing each other. And then there is the object I find hardest to shake. It is small, about 10 centimeters. It is carved from calcite. It was found near Bethlehem, and it is roughly 11,000 years old, made by people of the Natufian culture. At the very end of the last ice age, it shows 2 figures, embracing, face to face, wrapped around each other. Turn it in your hand, and it changes. From one angle, the figures merge into a single shape. From others, individual features emerge. Whoever carved it understood that 2 people holding each other are simultaneously 2 things and one thing. And they built that idea into stone with hand tools. It is called the Ein Sakri lovers, and it is the oldest known depiction in the world of 2 people embracing. It sits in the British Museum, and you can go and look at it. Nobody made that object for a practical reason. Somebody carved it because 2 people wrapped around each other was a thing worth representing. So where does that leave the original question? When did humans first fall in love? The honest answer has to be given in layers, because the different pieces of evidence date to wildly different times. The attachment chemistry, oxytocin and vasopressin in the reward system, is shared with rodents. That is tens of millions of years old. The anatomical hints of pair bonding, canine reduction and testes size, point somewhere in the millions of years, though the interpretation is argued over. The universality across every human society tells us it predates our dispersal out of Africa. That is at minimum 70,000 years, and probably much more. And the physical evidence of individual attachment strong enough to reorganize behavior appears clearly by 34,000 years ago in an ivory bead. Somewhere in that layering, a mind arrived that could not only bond, but knew it was bonding, that could sit in the dark and think about one specific person who was not there. We will probably never date that moment, because it left nothing behind. It happened inside a skull. But here is the last thing, and it is why this question is not really about the past. Everything I have described is still running. The scan Fisher ran would look the same today. The serotonin finding would replicate. The receptors in your reward system are in the same place as they were in the person who carved that calcite figurine, which means that when it happens to you, you are not having a modern experience. You are not doing something the culture taught you, or something invented by poets, or something you learned from films. You are running an extremely old program on unchanged hardware, and it is doing to you exactly what it did to them. The lost appetite, the intrusive thoughts, the 9 seconds replayed, the night spent awake. Somebody, 34,000 years ago, lay in the dark and could not stop thinking about one specific person and had no word for it, and nobody to explain it to, and no idea that everyone who came after them would feel exactly the same thing. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I would like real answers. What is the smallest, stupidest detail you remember about someone you fell for? Not the big things. The tiny one your brain filed away and refuses to delete. Tell me in the comments. Because I think that detail, the fact that we all have one, is the closest thing to evidence any of us will ever produce. We did not invent this. We just finally got words for the thing that was already happening.